that I don't know, my name is Bob Boyd, and I am in the School of Business. I teach finance and organizational behavior and director of interns. And I've also been involved in food and access to food now going back probably 12 years, maybe. So it's something that's very important to me. We have two guests with us. Hootie, are you here yet? Okay, our third guest is not here yet. But we have Mitch Gruber from FoodLink and Patty Lorenzen from St. Peter's Kitchen. And I'd like to start. If you have questions, we do need you. Just feel free to jump right in. If you're just a little nervous, just put it in the chat. We'll monitor that as we're going. But I got a couple of series of questions for everyone that's on the panel. So the first thing is, Patty, we're going to start with you. Is what do you do? Introduce yourself, your organization. What do you do? What do you do has to do with food and access to food and hunger?
My name is Patty Lorenzen. I run St. Peter's Soup Kitchen. I've been with the kitchen for about 20 years. We've seen a lot of changes over the years, but none quite as quick as we have over the last year with COVID. It's been crazy. We serve a hot lunch meal Monday through Friday. And we also run a food pantry on Tuesdays and Thursdays where people can actually get boxes of food to take home. We also have some emergency services that don't have to do with food, but those have grown out of our community who are coming for food. So we have some emergency rent and social security deposits, funeral expenses, phone, fax, and copy service, things of that nature. And then also through the year, we do some special events for children, coat drives, glove drives, toy stores at Christmas, a lot of extras. But the majority, the main focus of our ministry is a hot lunch service Monday through Friday. And it's usually a full meal because for some people that will be their main meal for the day. And
how many people do you serve every day?
We serve about 140 people a day on average.
Okay. And can you maybe describe the demographics of the people that?
Well, it's hard because it's always changing, but I would say the majority probably, excuse me, about probably 50 to 55% is African American. We have probably a 20% Hispanic. That's grown over the last few years, many more Hispanic population. And obviously another probably 10% white.
Why do they come to the kitchen? I know it's an obvious question, but I think it's one.
Yeah, mostly for food supplement. Some people are actually working, but they're earning minimum wage and they can't make expenses throughout the month. So they use us as a buffer. A lot of people have mental health issues. I would say that's probably the strongest deterrent to people getting off of benefits and things is mental health. It's really rampant and there's just not enough service for that. And then of course we have addiction, but addiction I think is a lot due to mental health. So, and you know, it can be anybody. We've seen an increase obviously when COVID hit and more lower to middle income families were starting to feel the pinch of not being able to supply enough food for their families. So, yeah, that would be.
Mitch, I think you started out food at the West Side Farm or South Wedge Farmers Market. Is that right? Where you started out? You're working on your doctorates back then.
Well, that's how I met you, but I've been at FoodLink since actually, I believe since I was in the womb, I was already on payroll. So FoodLink is the regional food bank here in Rochester. And we serve 10 counties, including Livingston County being one, but basically all the counties that touch Monroe and all the way down to the Pennsylvania border with in Allegheny County. And what food banks do, generally speaking, is we are the wholesale network of the emergency food network. So if there is overproduced product at some manufacturers, let's say, for example, that I'll use Barilla as an example because they are in Livingston County, they're in Avon. Let's say that Barilla overproduces or misproduces some pasta. they want to have one place to make a phone call and say, hey, can you take a truckload of this over, versus trying to call, someone like Patty, who would be able to take at most, X amount of cases. They don't want to have to make 100 phone calls to get rid of that truckload of product. So that's kind of what food banks were born out of, is dealing with logistics between the manufacturer, the producer, the wholesaler, the farmer, you name it, the federal government, right? The federal government has a lot of surplus commodities. And so all this food comes into food banks, and our job is to make sure that we get that food out to the folks like Patty, who are doing the work of serving individuals each and every day. So we have a membership network. FoodLink is a membership-based organization. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of members. Some of them are hot meal programs like Patty's and the St. Peter's Soup Kitchen. Others of them are more kind of traditional food closets, like the one at Groveland and Geneseo. And others could be things like settlement houses. It could be things like Head Start programs. There's a whole host of different types of places that it could be. And our job is to make sure that we are getting food from the manufacturer or the producer to the organization that's serving the individual directly. And I can talk for hours about how we do that work, the programs that we've developed over the years to complement that work. And I'm happy to do that. We need to complement that work, because one thing I want to say at the outset of this is that you don't solve hunger by feeding it. And that's a point that Patty made already. Nobody shows up to go get food at St. Peter's Soup Kitchen without a lot of other things in their lives having led them there. It's not just that, oh, I woke up this morning and I was hungry. There's always a lot of other things and issues and concerns going on. So we don't solve hunger by feeding it. We solve hunger by thinking about it as part of this continuum of social issues related to poverty, and building out the right constructs and the right support networks to be able to do that. And FoodLink has taken a real leadership role in that space across the state. Happy to talk about those things, but I hope that gave you a good start, Bob.
Yeah, no, that's real good. Talk about some of these partnerships. How do you develop them? What do they? How do they work?
Yeah, so our network is all nonprofit organizations who serve folks who are underserved. They serve low-income folks. They serve folks, like Patty said, who are experiencing mental health issues. They're experiencing homelessness, whatever the case may be. Those nonprofit organizations, many of them, I've known Patty since I started at FoodLink, but she's been working, and St. Peter's been working with FoodLink since well before I started here. FoodLink's a 44-year-old organization. A lot of our partnerships, like with St. Peter's, go back, almost that many years. With COVID, I can say that we've gotten more interest and feedback from new organizations, new partners who are really eager to develop these relationships. And then it really does become a matter of trying to make sure that it's the right fit. It's funny, colleges, specifically community colleges, have really started to pop up as important places to have food pantries. We work really closely with MCC. We are working with Alfred State. And a place like Geneseo, we've had conversations many times with Geneseo staff. And I think it's a really interesting question, Bob, is, what should the role of SUNY Geneseo be in terms of having a food pantry? Because you have one right in Geneseo, right? The Geneseo Groveland Pantry is a really excellent food pantry. I can tell you they've come a long way over the years. So the question becomes, should a place like SUNY Geneseo go in and start their own pantry? Should they find a way to support the existing one? Should they send resources and student volunteers and so on and so forth to them, or other way around? Those are the conversations that, it's my job to facilitate those and make sure that we're building the right partnerships when we can. And so far, so good. We have a really robust network. Again, hundreds and hundreds of partners across our entire service area.
Okay. Hey, Garth, we got Garth Freeman from Geneseo, who's has been involved in this stuff. Your comments on what's going on here in Geneseo around this?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks for the opportunity to chime in. Yeah, so I work with a group of students called the Food Security Advocates, some of whom are on the call here, Jocelyn, Robbie, a couple others, who have really ramped up their efforts to support our students as well as folks in the community with food access and security. And we are actually currently working on proposals to address the needs among our student body that are dealing with food insecurity or access to healthy food. And so part of this is due to SUNY, the SUNY-wide Food Insecurity Task Force, which is requiring all SUNYs to have a relationship with an existing pantry or to have a pantry on campus of their own. And so we have an awesome relationship, like Mitch said, with the Geneseo Groveland Emergency Food Pantry, and currently are running a program that allows students. I actually just sent the message out today to our entire student body, inviting them to submit to receive food through the Geneseo Groveland Pantry, but facilitated by our students to deliver a box of food once or twice a month if they are students in need. And so we've seen that number tick up over the last few years, both in the Geneseo community and then among our students as well. And the pandemic obviously has increased those needs and has really changed people's economic and financial needs as families, of parents of students who are going to school here. So it's a whole host of issues that are contributing to this, and just want to give a shout out to all the students who are really pushing this initiative and working towards sustainable solutions. And like Mitch said, we don't know right now if we need a pantry on campus because we have this great relationship, but it's something that we're researching and looking into, and we'll likely further develop our systems to serve our students who are in need.
Why do you think we have the problem of food insecurity on campus?
Well, I think, I think a lot of it, stems from, a changing demographic of our students who are coming to school here. Again, I think the economic realities of our local community, but, from students coming from all across the state. I just really think that the last handful of years have challenged folks. And then again, this COVID-19, the pandemic has really just exacerbated some of those. So in the local area, the Geneseo Groveland Pantry has seen like a 49% increase year over year, last year to this year, of usage of their pantry. And some of that has been due to students accessing the pantry. And we're aware of that. We did participate in the SUNY Insecurity Task Force survey that was disseminated in 2019, and of 520 students, it was two and five of those 520 indicated that they skipped a meal because they didn't have money to pay for a meal. And so we're seeing those numbers increase on our campus. We hope to incorporate some questions around food security in the climate study that's going to go out either at the end of this semester or the beginning of next, so we can better understand what our real need on campus is and how we can best support our students.
Great, thanks. Robbie has a question. Robbie, why don't you just go ahead and ask? Oh, sorry, Mitch.
I actually just want to, I want to answer one thing that you asked, and this is certainly my personal opinion on this, but the answer of why there's food insecurity on the Geneseo campus, I want to make a very clear statement. You can disagree if you'd like, anyone, but I think that the idea of talking about food insecurity as a notion is ultimately misleading. I think it obscures the larger picture. There is no such thing as food insecurity that is not directly related to poverty, right? In the United States of America, and I say this as someone who spent a good chunk of time living in Zimbabwe, where the reality is different. In the United States of America, there is no such thing as food insecurity because for any reason other than resources. If you have money, you can go grocery shopping and you can access food. It's literally that simple. And so food insecurity is an issue of resources, and do people have enough money to be able to buy the food that is required to have a balanced, nutritious meal, have a car potentially to get to to get to the store to do those things, have a kitchen to be able to prepare that food, all that stuff. But it all comes down to resources. And I think we all know the truth that, as Garth said, probably a very intentional and deliberate move across the SUNY spectrum is trying to make sure that they're reaching more low-income families as part of, New York State strategy, which is, I think, the right thing to do. But on top of that, we also know that prices, even for folks who are not necessarily accessing financial aid, the prices of tuition, of room, of books, of all those things continually go up. The wages for college students probably don't go up. And many college students probably don't have an opportunity to have a job. And so there's a resource issue, and there's tensions on resources, and that's going to keep happening at the college level. It's going to keep happening across the country. But I really don't want us to talk about food insecurity like it's some magical thing that exists outside of poverty, because those two things are just incredibly linked.
Okay. Robbie, you have a question. Why don't you go ahead? And if you just want to ask a question, just jump right in. Put it in the chat box or just jump right in. So Robbie, ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Boyd. Hi, Mitch. My name's Robbie. I'm one of the co-chairs of Food Security Advocates at Geneseo that Garth mentioned. So we help coordinate food assistance programs here at Geneseo. Like Garth mentioned, he sent out an email today about our food assistance program. So if anyone here is ever in need of assistance for any reason, we encourage you to sign up for the program, where we'll do delivery for you from the local food pantry. And so, yeah, I just wanted to ask you, Mitch, based on that, you mentioned like the idea of creating an on-campus food pantry. That's something that we are discussing. We had a petition that showed that over 170 students did think that that was a good idea. So yeah, just like what would be the steps for implementing that, and how could that work with the Geneseo Groveland Emergency Food Pantry and FoodLink? Could it work as an extension of the Geneseo Groveland Food Pantry, or would it be better to have it as its own separate group? And what would be the requirements to create a food pantry on campus?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so there's pretty basic membership criteria, like any membership-based organization. There's criteria for being a member that we could go through with anyone, but I will always kind of defer that question to the folks who are actually in the community. I'm not going to tell you or anyone else what the right thing to do for the Geneseo community or for the Livingston County community to do is. I will say this much: running a food pantry takes, and Patty can speak to this better than anyone else on this call. Running an emergency feeding program takes an incredible amount of work, discipline, diligence, fundraising. It also requires consistency. And I think that's something that is a built-in challenge for college campuses, is that you all are at some point going to graduate and keep moving, and you got to figure out who the next people are who are going to take it over. And I think the lack of consistency there can be a real challenge sometimes at the college or at the school level, versus someone like my dear friend Patty, who isn't going anywhere. And right. And so the consistency,
we hope that's true.
And so the consistency there, I think, is incredibly important. So those would be the questions that I would want to answer. Frankly, Robbie, if I were a Geneseo student having these conversations, I would first try to ascertain what is the capacity of the Geneseo Groveland food pantry. What do they want? What do they see as the needs? And I would always keep in the back of my mind that SUNY Geneseo and their students should be a resource to them. If what they say to you is there's certain gaps that we just can't fill, and we really need someone else to fill those gaps, then maybe it's starting your own pantry. If they say, well, what we really need is we need more volunteers, we need some more dollars, we need some more space, then I would imagine those are all things that SUNY Geneseo could help with without starting their own organization. But that's a conversation I think you all ought to have with them.
Sure. Providing the volunteers. Patty, can you maybe give us some insight on what it really takes to run a pantry? What we got set up, in full disclosure, I'm the treasurer at St. Peter's Kitchen. But what do you have? Can you maybe talk about the pantry, how it worked pre-COVID, what happened during COVID, and where we're going? I think that's a good point.
Well, pantries can be very time consuming. They are, first of all, you got to secure donations, you got to secure funding. You have to have the volunteer staff to run it, as Mitch said. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And not just once you get the donations, you got to have somebody there that's going to make sure the donations get taken in and stored and that be dispersed properly according to standards. We follow the FoodLink standards for running a food pantry. And before COVID, we had a shopper's choice. They would come into our pantry and actually pick out the foods and the canned goods that they would like. We had meats that were available and they were able to pick out meats. We tried to supply our pantry with a lot of fresh vegetables and fruits, and they were able to get those too. And after COVID, we went to boxes, as most of the city did that were pantries, and we actually had to just pack the boxes for them and deliver them when they came to our facility. We had to deliver the box up to them. And we could give them a few choices, like we would give them, we have pork, chicken, or meat, or beef. What would you like? And we could put that in the box for them, what they would pick. But it was very compact and very quick. And actually, they were not allowed in our space, especially when COVID first hit. So we were doing everything outside. It's a lot of work. And I really do think that the future for food service organizations, and Mitch might agree with me on this, is that it's collaboration. It's being able to collaborate with the other people that are in your area so that you're making the best use of the resources that you have. And that not, one soup kitchen like your pantry in Groveland, or, 2 miles away is another pantry, that they're not fighting for those resources, that they can combine and use them as efficiently and as effectively as possible. So, and that's what we've tried to do too, is work along with other pantries and kitchens actually to be able to provide that kind of food and that kind of service.
What kind of resources are most in need? Is it food? Is it volunteers? Is it space? Is it money?
Well, I think it depends on the organization. We've always been very blessed to have an amazing amount of donations come in. And FoodLink has been so unbelievably supportive over the years for us. I don't think we could be here without FoodLink. And it's just been amazing to be a part of that organization. In recent years, we've been able to increase our donations through the generosity really of FoodLink, because we do have great capacity here for storage. And so some of the stores were able to bring us more things because we had the freezer space and the refrigerator space to be able to do that. And so we get a bunch of our food also donated through stores. Wegmans, Trader Joe's, and Tops out in Hilton all donate to us weekly. And then we're able to pick up things we don't get through donations through FoodLink. So, and all of that has to be documented. All of that is paperwork. All of that is things that you don't think of. All of that has to be recorded. And when you're writing for grants, all that information is important. So there's a lot of work that goes into running a food service organization.
Is there enough food for people? This is for both Mitch, Patty, Garth, and I don't, Hootie, did you join us yet? Guess not. Do you think we really have a food shortage, or is it something else?
I think, well, in the city of Rochester, I can't speak for the outlying areas. I don't think anybody in Rochester should go hungry. I think there's quite a bit of food that's available. I think the biggest dilemma is the transportation, trying to get people to the places that give out the food, have them have enough strength to carry it all home when they do get it, or bus passes to be able to get home. I don't know, Mitch has probably a better take on that than me because he's watching the whole area. But in our area, we're over on the west side of Rochester, over by the old St. Mary's Hospital. We have the food. We have the food for the people. We have several organizations in our area that also have food available. So Mitch, do you want to take that and see?
Yeah, I would echo what Patty said. It's not just the city of Rochester, it's across New York State and frankly across the country. We do not have a production problem. We produce enough food for everybody to eat. Hell, we throw away enough food as a country for everybody to be able to eat equitably and eat well. That's not the issue. The issue is a number of things. First and foremost, it's the distribution logistics of, running these food pantries. We could have pop-up food pantries everywhere. Right now there's a lot of movement about these, small pop-up little stands, kind of like you see the little free libraries. You're seeing a lot of the little free pantries across the country. And I think those are great, but I think the distribution logistics make that actually very, very difficult to think about maintaining in the long term. So logistics are one, but Bob, I hate to say this to a professor of business and economics, but I'm mindful of the fact that a lot of you don't know me, so take this with a grain of salt. The biggest issue is capitalism. Ultimately, we live in a time and place where we have completely commodified food. If you have money, you get food. If you don't have money, you don't get food. It's just not more complicated than that. I don't know how well all of you know the city of Rochester, but I'll tell you that where Patty runs her food pantry and soup kitchen, I live 3 blocks away. Patty, I walk by every day and wait. I wait for one day to see you while I'm walking my little boy outside. I'll call you next time. But I live 3 blocks away. There's no grocery store for miles and miles and miles. Now, look, I'm a middle class guy with a car. I go to Wegmans when I want to. This isn't about me, but my neighbors, there's no grocery stores for miles away because the grocery stores have determined that there is no way for them to make the profit they want in those communities. Meanwhile, you go to Pittsford Plaza in the suburb of surrounding Rochester, and there you have the single biggest Wegmans, their flagship store. You have the only Trader Joe's in the whole region, and you have Whole Foods right now clamoring to get in to be the only Whole Foods in the whole region, all within literally a square mile of each other. I could stand in one spot and throw a baseball to all 3 locations. So how is that possible? Well, it's the story of capitalism and the story of economics of our country, that these giant corporations see money to be made in these specific locations. They see no money to be made in other locations. So it's not about the production of food. It's not about whether we have enough. It's about how we create equitable distribution strategies and businesses that are willing to do the right thing, and nonprofits like Patty who are able to do the right thing, and how we can keep kind of building that together. And it's going to take quite some time, but we're in the process of making it happen, Bob.
No, that's absolutely fair. And I think you got to look at it within, add a couple things on, is that roughly from the West Side Farmers Market, I can tell you, about 40% of the people who live within a mile of the market do not have a vehicle. So they have that additional issue of being able to get to a store. And it comes back to Mitch's, why don't they have a car? Well, when you're just trying to pay rent and eat, you just don't have money for that. The other thing is you shop in bodegas. Now, for those of you that are downstaters and come from New York City, when you say a bodega and we say a bodega from upstate, they're not the same thing. Okay, I think there's really a big difference because there's high carb, high fat food, very little fresh fruits and vegetables. So people simply don't have the access to be able, if they even have, they have to go outside the area, and the prices in the bodegas can be incredibly expensive for what you get. So I think that all ties together. And there's a question for Mary Ellen Zuckerman.
Robbie, you want to take this one? Can you see it in the chat there? What are the barriers that exist for students to access, the pantry or other services that we might provide?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that there are a lot of elements to that. And that's something I actually wanted to ask Patty and Mitch about too, just about that issue, just because that is something that we have seen in working with the Geneseo Growth and Emergency Food Pantry. Honestly, before we started offering our delivery program, where we now serve well over 60 students, I think there were literally maybe 2 students using the program at Geneseo Groveland. So it was not being used very much at all, which is really disheartening, because I agree that Geneseo Groveland Emergency Food Pantry is a really great program. Working with Deb is a really great pleasure, and they do an amazing job to serve the community. But I think there is a bit of a stigma for students to go to a food pantry. I think in the survey that Garth mentioned, it said that only, I think, 10% of students said they would be comfortable going to the current food pantry. So it is sad to see that there is a bit of a stigma there, and we're hoping to destigmatize it, normalize it for students to ask for help and get help, because it is so important that students recognize that food security is such a common thing. and that, you should be able to ask for help if you need it. So yeah, I think there are a lot of elements to it. I think, also just distance. While the food pantry is in a prime location for some people, I think it is a little disconnected and being harder for on-campus students to access. But yeah, I'm honestly not super sure why it's harder for students to use the program, but it is just disheartening to see that not a lot of students were using the program, but we're glad that we've been able to implement ways that have helped students increase access for students. So yeah, I'm just definitely interested in ways to even increase more just how to help students get the food assistance they need and help them feel comfortable in doing so.
I'd like to.
Anybody else here taking advantage of the food program?
Sorry, Bob.
Has anybody else used the?
Bob, do you mind? Can I add one thing before you ask that question?
Sure.
One thing I just want to point out to everyone too is that the idea of emergency food relief, the work that Patty and I do every day, and Bob and probably Robbie and many others on the call, it is very intentionally intended to fill a gap that exists, again, a broken record, because of resources. So it's a gap that exists because of artificially high unemployment rates, artificially low minimum wages, so on and so forth. But it's also, more than anything else, it's a gap that exists outside of SNAP benefits, aka food stamps, which are really supposed to be the first way to fill this gap. And one thing that I would just say to everyone on the call, especially the folks like Robbie who are advocating for use of food pantry, first and foremost, it should be about making sure that everybody who qualifies for SNAP benefits are accessing SNAP benefits. Let's put more money into people's pockets, because that will go a lot further than utilizing food pantries. And I believe, and I have to admit I'm not an expert on this, but I believe that New York State just proposed changing, or maybe it was the USDA proposed changing some things to allow more college students to become SNAP eligible. Maybe some of you on the call know more information than I do about this, but whatever the change was, let's make sure that before we start to inundate the Geneseo Groveland Food Pantry with more requests for food, that everybody who's eligible for SNAP benefits is getting them first and foremost.
Excellent point, Mitch. Excellent.
Yeah, they did just update those, but it's just for the emergency COVID times as far as expanding SNAP benefits. It just kind of lowered the income threshold, or raised the income threshold, whichever one. But it may impact some of the students, even students on this call, so that's something. It was in the message again that went out today, that I sent out about food resources. So, but if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to dig into that with you, to see if people are eligible.
Yeah, there's a couple questions out there. The first one from Hannah. What's the difference between bodegas from upstate and downstate? And let me just refer to one that I know in Brooklyn. It's up on 4th Avenue, 432 4th Avenue. And you can go in and they have a full array of, it's a primarily Mexican, Spanish food, but a whole array of food that they have in a prepared basis, but they also have a full vegetable section and it's fresh. They have a broad variety of different types of food, so that you can get a variety of food and make it that it works. Now, you go to some of them, I will leave the name up Geneseo Street. I think you could know a couple of them. And basically, they don't have that variety, okay? They have a very limited, the biggest display in the store is potato chips, beer, pop, and some canned foods. Did I get that, Patty, Mitch? That's basically it. So where in New York, you don't have supermarkets for the most part. You do most of a lot of shopping if you're in New York is in a bodega. But up here, the bodegas seem to be located in areas of low income, which are disproportionately people of color. Okay, so that's there. Next one, Jess Rivera. You have a question.
I think Jess might have just hopped off. Maybe disconnected, I'm sure.
Okay, she's able to get Hannah, you're getting a brief 6. Yeah, you can't find that up here. Next one, lives, Doug, go ahead. Ask your question. I'll read the question. We at Lives, Lives, in the fall, read an article about movie theaters needed to store their excess popcorn products to companies like yours. Has your company ever acquired popcorn products from movie theaters? And if so, what movie theaters have, if you're allowed to? So I guess when they went in shutdown, they had all this product.
The answer to that question is no. We, on the contrary, or on a different way of looking at it, is that we have helped out a lot of small businesses over the years. We always try to make sure that that's actually one of the ways Bob and I, or Professor Boyd and I first got hooked up, because FoodLink really believes in trying to utilize our assets to help and leverage small businesses. You know, we have warehouses and trucks and forklifts and staff and space and all that stuff. And if we can be helpful to small businesses, it is our job and our duty to do so. And we have some great success stories with that. But the popcorn thing is interesting. I mean, popcorn in and of itself is not too bad, but we do actually have some we have some regulations we put into place recently to make sure that we're not just accepting the very products that are giving poor folks diabetes, hypertension, heart disease in our country. You know, we know that if you are poor in the United States of America, you have a much higher likelihood of having those things: hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease. And so we want, and part of that, by the way, is for the reasons Bob explained about the bodegas and what the offerings are there. But for example, we don't accept soda in our facility anymore. We don't accept candy in our facility anymore. So popcorn, we would accept, but probably not all the butter that comes with it, for what it's worth.
That's a good one. Jocelyn, you have a pointer question.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat, but one thing I did think of was with COVID-19, there's been a lot of families that hadn't previously had to use food pantries or SNAP benefits. So I think that now with COVID going on over a year, that there is a lack of education for those specific people on how to access either SNAP or food pantries. And that is something that needs to get filled more, and perhaps also on our campus community.
Have you seen a change in mix of people, Patty? Or demand as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, we have. We've seen a change. I can't be specific about it. It's just our numbers have grown, and it seems like there's some pretty, and this is you don't want to judge people, but they come in and they look pretty much together, and like they have really nice clothes, or their nails are all done and their hair is all done, and they look like, but they're still accessing this food every day. And nobody goes to a soup kitchen just to get a free meal. That's very, very rare. People don't want to be really associated with going to a free food place if they don't have to be. So yeah, we've seen a bunch of that. And again, I think COVID has just changed the face of our whole way of distributing our food. And so it's a little bit easier, I think, to just pull up and pick up your food and go home versus having to come down and sit and eat with the community. Although most of our community is really sad that they're not there for the whole lunch hour, because that was their socialization hour with everybody. So it's more than just food at a kitchen, or mostly at a kitchen. So I hope that answered your question.
Mitch, your thoughts on that? You see bigger demand today because of COVID?
Oh, undeniably. Yeah. I mean, our unemployment rates are high. Our economy is suffering. And that always means there's going to be a major increase. I'll share with folks, I started at FoodLink in 2008, right after, maybe it was right during the recession. I don't know, I was 21 or 22. What do I remember from 2008? But our numbers at that point went from we were doing 8 million pounds of food a year as an organization, to, in pretty short order, we became about an 18 million pound a year food bank. So Bob, I'm not very good at math, but that's like maybe 150% increase or 130% increase or something like that, from 8 million to 18 million. And that happened over the course of about really just during the recession of 08, 09, until the economy recovered. However, at that point, when the economy recovered, our numbers never really went back down. They never decreased lower than the 16, 17, 18 million that I just described. And a lot of that is because I think that there's economists who make this argument more eloquently than me, that when the economy recovers from a recession, it recovers the slowest for people who are the poorest of the poor. It recovers the slowest for people who have the least amount of resources to start with. And on top of that, you also see inflation in things like grocery and food that doesn't go away anytime soon. So during COVID, our numbers have increased from about 18 million pounds of food, which is where we've been since the recession and in my entire tenure at FoodLink, to this year, we're going to distribute about 25 to 26 million pounds of food.
That's
Just
a lot of food.
a gigantic increase. And what's scary is that I don't believe it's going to go back down. So maybe it will. I certainly hope that it will. This isn't like a competition. The more food we distribute, the better. We're trying to meet the need, but we'd love for those numbers to go down. But I don't suspect they will, because our economy is going to continue to drag. And again, I think it's going to continue to drag specifically for the folks who are the poorest in our community. So that's a really major concern. But yeah, we've seen numbers spike pretty dramatically. And there's a lot of reasons for that, by the way. One that I just want to point to in particular is with schools closed for a year, there were so many parents and families who depended on school breakfast and school lunch that now had to feed kids 2 additional times a day. And that put a huge strain on a lot of families.
You think with it when we see the recovery, and we're starting to see signs of it, at least from at a top level, that this will be a recovery across all demographics, or is this one that's going to be a recovery of those in upper middle class and the well-to-do?
I was hoping you would educate me on that, Professor.
Yeah, I suspect that, those that are doing well will do even better. And I suspect those that are working in some basic subsistence jobs are not going to benefit from that. And I think coming back to what Patty said when she started, there's a lot of other issues. And as you said too, Mitch, not just food, but dealing with behavioral health issues, addiction, that long-term poverty. I think I don't know that we fully understand the impact of generation after generation of poverty around basic food. And our other speaker, who was supposed to be here today, was going to talk about the West Side Farmers Market, which you come up to, Mitch. We adapted to COVID, but one of the things I ended up doing this year, we lost a farmer, and I ended up selling a lot of stuff. I'm the farmer this summer numerous times, and it totally surprised me that people don't know how to cook. You'd say, how do you make corn on the cob? And I was teaching people how to make corn on the cob. And I think about it, what happened? Why is it that you don't know how to cook? Is it that you just live on, junk food? And I think we have education as a problem there too, with a lot of folks. Other questions?
I'm curious, Mitch and Patty, what kind of, we hear some things from folks in the community about food pantries, one of which, Patty, you mentioned, saying, people don't go to food pantries or food soup kitchens just because they're like, I want a free meal today. That's not really happening. But you hear that from people in the community saying, folks will take advantage of it. It is one of the things that we've heard, even in some feedback around supporting our students on campus, that, students are always hungry and they'll just, instead of using their meal plan, they'll just look to get that box of food. I've heard folks say, one of the requirements that used to exist at the Geneseo Groveland Pantry was to show your SNAP benefit card when you went to get your food. And that was sort of an income identifier to say, like, oh, you're at this income level, you must need this food. And I've heard folks say, like, if they already have SNAP, what are they doing at the food pantry taking this resource, What do you say when people push back in those ways or have those kinds of criticisms or try to kind of find flaws or faults in these systems that provide needed resources to our community members?
Patty, you want to take that to start? You want me to, Patty?
My heat is very noisy. I had to turn it off first. Well, you never know. You never know when you're giving out food to people, what they're going to do with it, how they're going to use it. Most of the people, I'd say 95% of the people that come to food pantries are in need. And the food that we provide for them will last 3 days. So what are they going to do for the rest of the month? It's not like you're supplying food for them for the whole entire month or the whole entire year. You're supplying food for a couple of days for them to get through. So you do want to be aware. You do want to be efficient with the foods that you do get. But once it leaves your premises, it leaves your premises, and it's up to the person that's getting the food how they're going to handle it. And all you can do is hope that what you are able to give is helpful, and hopefully put some type of referral program in or something to help them address the issues of why they're needing the food and being able to help them get out of that state of poverty. So, and it might just be for, 6 months because of COVID, and it might be something that's ongoing because a lot of our community, as Bob said, never learned to cook, never learned how to take care of themselves food-wise. They need the opening of a can and heating it up and being able to eat it versus it cooking a whole meal. So that's all.
Patty is much better at those types of questions than I am, because that's the right answer. But I will give you what my answer would be, Garth, which doesn't always go over so well. Who the hell cares? Who cares? Like, we don't, again, back to the question that was asked earlier about whether there's enough food or not. It's not like if Patty serves, let's say that I come in and I don't need the food according to someone's determination of what need is. It's not like if she feeds me, that means she's turning somebody else away that does need the food. That's just not how it works. There's enough food for everybody that needs it. And in some ways, yeah, I see some of the comments in the chat, but I just don't think the question matters. I don't think it needs an answer. I think the question that does need to be answered is, why do so many people need emergency food? I think that's a good question to ask, and I think we should get at that. And then I think a logical question would be, is everyone who needs emergency food able to access it? And I think Patty and I have already told you all that we think that the answer to that is yes. So then who the hell cares what kind of car someone is driving or what kind of shoes someone is wearing or whether they have income verification or not? I just don't see why it matters. And I don't tend to answer those questions except by asking who the hell cares.
Sure. Good point. We got a couple of comments, and I just like to Hannah, Hannah Baptiste, you had some comments. Just jump right in and make your comments.
Yeah. Okay. Do I speak or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I thought I made it to everyone, but I just wanted to contribute. Like, among my friend group, like I'm only friends with students of color, and that's just how it just ended to be. But we always had this running joke around food where, like, if you eat 3 meals a day, you're gonna run out of your meal plan. And I thought they were joking as a freshman new to campus. So I used got 3 meals from campus. And then I realized that I was running out and I couldn't suffice 3. So I asked like my grandparents for money, things like that. Like, cause I realized that eating 3 meals a day cannot go by campus. I think they give you around 2,000 or something. That seems a lot, but you cannot make 3 meals a day when like a regular meal on campus is $10 or $15. And all my friends, we realized that we were running out too when they started to get jobs. So I think that's, a good thing. Not a good thing, but a good, a myth that it could feed 3 of us.
Okay, Lizette Alvarado, you have a comment too. Jump right in. Okay, Jocelyn, you had your hand up.
Yeah, as both mentioned, Patty said earlier, there's a lot of different fields that go into addressing this issue of food insecurity. Who do you think should be responsible for addressing it? Like at what level? Is it more at the individual level? Is it the organizational level? Is it state, country? What kind of, who should be responsible for this?
I love that question. Thank you for asking it. I think it's the question, and I think that the answer is that it should be our nation's responsibility to make sure that everybody can eat the food they need to eat. You know, in a previous life, I was a doctor. I did a doctorate in history at the University of Rochester, and one of the things that I wrote about was essentially there was a brief moment of time where our country thought about food as a public utility. Didn't last for very long. It was what's known as the progressive era of United States politics, basically the turn of the century. But that's why we have things like public marketplaces, right? Like if you've ever been to the Rochester Public Market as an example. And, you know, our government makes sure that people have access to water. That's a public utility. Why don't we make sure people have access to food? It just wouldn't be that difficult, but it certainly is a whole different philosophy. So I would say that, you know, barring that, things like expanding SNAP benefits, making sure that everybody has dollars that they need to be able to buy the food they want, things like universal basic income, those types of initiatives, I think those are the right steps. But ultimately, I think the federal government, more than any other individual place, ought to be making sure that people have a basic safety net of food. I think beyond that, it's up to the individual to make sure that they have the particular foods that they want, that they have the particular foods that them and their family, you know, are comfortable with and desire, and, you know, that they have the right amounts or this, that, or the other thing. But in terms of a basic safety net, federal government all day.
But Tyler from Lives has one question: is do church organizations, pantries, and the soup kitchens work with each other, and do they send food to the Geneseo Groveland Pantry?
The role of churches in the Emergency Food Network is predominantly to run food pantries. The vast majority of our partners are in fact faith-based. Geneseo Groveland, I actually don't know anymore. They for a long time they were housed in a church, and I'm pretty sure there's still a lot of connection with. Is it the Livingston County Council of Churches? Is that right, Garth?
The Council of Churches actually has dissolved over the last couple of years, but they are still housed at the Central Presbyterian Church, though they are their own 501c3 as of the last year.
Right.
So they're not truly connected to the church in any kind of financial way, but they are housed there and have that facility to use. So there's a great partnership between the church and the pantry. And I know the church down at the bottom of the hill, the Methodist Church, is also now providing food. They always have, but I believe, Mitch, and maybe you can correct me here, I believe now they are part of your, Food Link's kind of portfolio of programs as well. So we have another one very close to campus that's serving folks in need as well, just literally just off the west side of campus.
As we're running down to the wire, I'd just like to ask Patty and Mitch and Garth, what can people do who want to, we're all here learning. I'm sure a lot of people learn things they never knew, but what can they do? What can we encourage students students, faculty, staff, friends, what can we encourage them to do to address this issue with hunger? And we see that it's real. What advice what can we do?
I'll just hop in with, especially here on campus. join Food Security Advocates if you're interested in this work. I have a number of the students who are currently leading Food Security Advocates are graduating. They do have some underclassmen in the pipeline to kind of take on those leadership roles, but we're always looking for more people to get involved. We need volunteers to help deliver the food that we're getting from the pantry to our folks on campus and in the community. We've done a lot of fundraisers for the pantry. Food Security Advocates raised over $400 last semester that went directly to the pantry, which then helps them purchase more product to run their programs. And really just being involved and engaged in these conversations. And I think importantly, sort of in the background of our comments today, but thinking about this in terms of, anti-racism and diversity, equity, inclusion, what does it mean to really think about those things in a holistic way? So yeah, and if you ever have any questions or want to figure out how to get involved, you can reach out to me. That's what I'm here for.
Patty, what would you say? You're muted.
Can always say donate food, volunteer, all the little things that go with running the organizations that supply food. I think educate yourselves. I think become educated on poverty, on mental health, on the issues that cause people to be poor. Because that's where tolerance and compassion come in, and that's when maybe we can offshoot from just supplying food and really becoming people of advocacy and maybe one-on-one mentoring to help our community.
Great. Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Emergency Food Network is one of the easiest places to do some volunteer work. And whether it's on campus or whether it's with a partner like Geneseo Groveland, or whether it's even with a place like Foodlink or St. Peter's Soup Kitchen, I would say first and foremost, get involved and volunteer. It helps. We need volunteers in this network. And in particular, I would say we really need young volunteers. This entire network is built off of, volunteers, and a lot of them are starting to age out and can't volunteer that much anymore, especially COVID in particular has made that a real reality. And the younger generation has not stepped up to fill that void. So I'm putting a little bit of pressure on you all to hopefully find some way somehow to get involved and volunteer. The other thing I would say is, I know there's not time for this, and because I in particular have to go in a minute, Bob, but just remember that, how do I say this? So I've been working in the Emergency Food Network now for 13 years. I had no idea what the Emergency Food Network was when I was a college student. I just knew that it didn't make sense for people to be hungry in our community, and I figured out how to get involved, and it eventually led into a thing that has become a career for me. I hope that each and every one of you, whether it's this field or whether it's some other field in the nonprofit world, you recognize that when there are big societal problems to be able to be fixed, there may not be a direct and clear career pathway to it, but there's lots of ways to get involved, and it can lead to some amazing opportunities for you. And I hope that you really start to open your mind to those things. And I'm sure you are, which is why you're on this call today.
Absolutely. So I just want to take a minute and thank Patty, thank Mitch, Garth for being last minute jump in. I also want to thank, I know we have a couple volunteers who are already working on this. Robbie and Jennifer, you're a volunteer at Foodlink, right? So we have all people volunteering. So all the volunteers, I thank you. I encourage you to keep on learning. Have a wonderful day.